welcome to No Movies in Hell. I'm Chris Geiger.
I'm LaClaw Scott, and today we are reviewing All Quiet on the Western Front.
Oscar nominated.
Oscar nominated. Surprising, I didn't know of this film until it was nominated, and then I kept on seeing ads for it. I don't know about you.
So I knew it was out before it was nominated, but I had very little interest in watching it because I don't know. Well, so the story you probably already know, right? That it's most people had to read it in high school, or a lot of people had to read it in high school. It just seemed like, why would you make this movie now? Is it so good that it's nominated for an Oscar? So I went back and watched it, and actually, I think it really is a very good war movie. You know, they did a very good job of portraying the battle scenes and kind of the horror of it and the camaraderie that develops between people who are in that situation, sort of what happens to them. It seems like it follows the book pretty closely, although it does seem like, and it was a long time ago that I remember the book, but I feel like it's maybe some of the things were out of sequence. But so that was my general impression. But I thought it was well done, and I don't know if it should be Best Picture, but it's in there, I guess.
I've never had to read the book in high school. Like, this is the first time of me like hearing about it. And I was reading that this was almost the third adaptation from the book, but very different, and obviously had the most budget because it's a Netflix film. So I had no idea going in what the story was going to be about. I often confused it with another film that I kept seeing previews for about like World War One, but I think the latter film is kind of like a psychological horror film. So I like when I go to see, trailers, I was like, oh, I think that's all the Western Front, and it's like not. I forgot what the name of the movie is, so I was like, oh, okay. A lot of first-time actors. I think they did very well. I think it is the last like World War One film I saw was 1917, what, 3 years ago now. And I'm not a person that likes war films, especially like it's a lot. And what's interesting is I love horror films. I don't like war films. I find it interesting that this film came out at this time where it is a great, war film, and it humanizes a lot of what's going on, but unfortunately it's like on the back of like World War One. You have sympathy for folks who are trying to be a rising power and like eliminate a lot of countries and people. So I was just like, oh, this is horrible. And then it was like, yes, and this is horrible. Like, it's humanizing story. And then you see, which I've never seen before, like in some other war films, there's like the administrative part, the negotiating with France, and how they're so far removed from the folks in the trenches, quite literally, and how they have food, they have companions, their dogs, they say that they're soldiers, they never step foot on the battlefield, and like these people who are fighting and they're losing this war, they're just collateral damage.
Right. I think the scene where they're going to enlist, and they get their uniforms and they're super excited, and they have like the uniform is a recycled uniform from someone else.
Yeah.
Like, that's very
He's like, oh, this isn't my size. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, this has someone else's name in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go to the slides. So I rated this one pretty highly, but you did not. Well, you gave it like better than average, definitely better than average.
Yeah, I just think that, for me, I just don't like war film.
I think
but on a technical level,
yeah,
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the genre of war films, like you have Saving Private Ryan and 1917 and Dunkirk and those sorts of movies that are like best in class war movies. And I feel like this checked a lot of the boxes. So I feel like I would recommend it, even though at some point you're like, well, I've seen war movies and I know how that one ended. So
Yeah.
do I need to watch another war movie? But I think it probably, especially for people in high school who are reading the book, this is a great movie to accompany that discussion. I don't know if people in high school are still reading this book, but
I completely agree. I was like, now that I know that, the book was, I guess, required reading in high school, I would definitely couple it with this film with the book. Like for me, I think middle school was like 1984, read the book, and then we watched the film. Yeah, I think it was from like the 80s.
I don't know if Netflix will, I'm sure Netflix will make its money back if every school watches the at least 3 times.
They all have a subscription and not just one subscription and multiple logins for each.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it since it is one of the most expensive war films. I guess they make it back and they recoup their cost with an award, because then they can leverage that for higher demand in terms of, or like the producers or directors or technical folks can leverage that for higher rates.
It's an interesting business model. Because they're funding so much content right now.
Yep. Now I think about it, like they don't really release some seasons of TV shows that people like, but then it's like, okay, so then does that budget just move to things like, these type of films? Like, does the comedy television or series, that budget get dampened and then it gets ramped up for films that are positioned to win awards?
It's a good question. If anybody out there knows
I need to find a Netflix person to bring them on the show. So we can ask all these important questions.
Maybe somebody who used to work for Netflix, because I don't know if you are allowed to say if you work for Netflix now, what the business model is. Do you have anything to plug in this episode?
I do not.
So we have our Oscar poll. It's available. I'll put the link in the description below. Keep in mind that the winner of our Oscar poll this year will be invited to sit in and review a movie with us. I'm sure everyone wants to do that.
Of course, we're carrying on the tradition.
That's right. So last year's winner was Jessica Jung. She was on actually, she's been on more than one episode. So she's a repeat guest. So that's kind of it on the plug department for me.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.